Welcome, everybody. Coming at you live from New York and Ecuador. This is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. I'm Dal Gurunga, along with my co-hosts Achyuta Gopi and Kishore Chandra. I'm so glad to be virtually staring at a screen with. You guys look beautiful. Just want you to know that. Kishore Chandra, did you ever put two and two together that your name is Kishore Chandra and there's a moon behind you?
I try to surround myself with as many moons as possible in this life.
I do too. That's why I keep you as a friend.
Oh.
How we doing? How are you? How was it since the last time we spoke? How did you sleep? How was your day? How's life? Not sure.
Podcast only 30 minutes.
Podcast is 30 minutes. Let's get to it, guys. Come on. Let's get to it. All right, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it. Thanks for keeping it real, being honest. We got no time for this stuff. Like, listen, people aren't listening to follow my sleep patterns, although I do think people would be interested to know. We're in chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 3 is entitled Karma Yoga, the yoga of, or the way of connecting through action, through living life, not by running away from life, but by embracing life from an elevated place, from a mature place, from an integrated place. And Arjuna is asking the questions of what does that mean and look like, because it seems contradictory. To be spiritual, my material life and my spiritual life seem to be at odds with each other, and I either need to embrace one or the other, as opposed to finding a way to integrate them together and make my material life spiritual by through a process of karma yoga. And we were getting on this point of the last verse that we read, verse 8, perform your prescribed duty, which Krishna will describe as your karma in this life, or your dharma in this life, your swadharma. For doing so is better than not working. We've been having some great discussions around this idea of discovering our identity in life, embracing our true self, as well as uncovering and kind of shedding layers of our false self. And we've discussing nature versus nurture, and we got really vulnerable and into very detailed discussions about the racial, social identities that we have in this life and what it means to navigate those in a spiritual context, in the sense of the question that I had that we left off yesterday, was that I wrote down as, how do you, so as a black, Achyuta Gopi as a black woman, Kishore Chandra as a gay Latino man, we're just diving right into it. There are certain boxes and stereotypes and oppressive identities that come along with that. And how do you not live or remain in those boxes or oppressive identities, at the same time explore and embrace who you are in this life and bring that into your spiritual life? So there's a side of like, this is not who I am. This is not me. I'm an eternal spirit soul. I'm eternal. That's not who I am. And at the same time, that's a big piece of who I am in this life. And like I remember Kishore Chandra, you brought up the question of that gets asked of like, if you had a choice, would you choose to not be gay? Would you choose to be different? And it's just like, why are you asking that question? And this sense of like, this is bad who I am. And so we know that we're eternal spirit souls, and we're not our bodies, we're not our material identities. And at the same time, our material identities in this life are significant and make up a big part of who we are. So that's where we left off yesterday. And I felt like I just kind of just barreled into like a big conversation without any clear question necessarily. But I feel like whenever you guys talk about, whenever we talk about, we ended last yesterday about being real and vulnerable. I think it gives a lot of space for people to feel like they have a place they belong, because a lot of us wander through spiritual life feeling like there's a part of me that doesn't belong. And I think that when we speak honestly and authentically from our lived experience of spiritual life, it gives people a sense of feeling like they belong. Did I make sense and tee things up in a way, or was I just like,
I think sometimes there can be the pressure to almost be like you have to be the one to save the entirety of the race or group or whatever that you are a part of, even if you are not really like you might identify a certain way, but no, like, but I don't necessarily think I'm a part of the group. It's like I'm in there because these are different identifications. um but what happens is, I think that sometimes people press it upon you to be like the savior, the advocate for every single facet of that group, and if you are not advocating for it, then you are bad. And we can take some of that pressure off of ourselves. I think it's really important to be able to take pressure off of ourselves. I do not have to advocate for every single Black person's cause, because it would not be humanly possible. Sometimes all we can do is try and get through our lives. So how does it affect me is, growing up in a spiritual community, I almost felt like I was never allowed to talk about it with anyone else, because you're not this body. What are you doing talking about that? That's the body. You can't be on a bodily designation. You're not allowed to talk about that. But you could tell that I was being interacted with, judged based upon that same bodily designation that they don't want you to talk about. So then it just feels like a way of control. It's another way of like, good devotees are humble and tolerant, which means that you never speak out in resistance to anything that I'm saying, which is not actually what that means. But as a way of other people making themselves feel better, other people asserting their power over you, or, as you know, we like to say in the bhakti circuit, lording it over other people in other situations. It can become this strange cognitive dissonance where you are living by, judged by, interacted with according to this very same thing that you are also being forced to repress at the same time. So I kind of feel like there's always finding a little bit of a balance around that, because the minute you do say something in resistance, they use that very same thing to completely invalidate you, to completely just kind of like it, you get overlooked immediately. Well, you must not be spiritually advanced because now you're speaking up about this. And we're going to completely ignore what you've said you feel. If you feel fear, if you feel guilt, if you feel pressure, if you feel anxiety, we're going to completely ignore that part. And we're going to just focus on the fact that you even opened up your mouth to speak about this. So now, clearly, you're not spiritually advanced. You must be on a lower mindset than others, and you're not going to get the sympathy that you were hoping for. You're not going to get the actions that you were hoping for. You're not going to get the people on your side that you were hoping for, because now we have the power to take all of that away just because you dared to raise your voice. And also, you're probably less intelligent at that point. Like, it's like, oh, I could see you're not advanced, you're less intelligent, you're on this bodily platform. So it does become a little bit of a tightrope that you are walking. Eventually, that tightrope becomes a little more invisible to the naked eye, but your body still feels it. Your nervous system still feels it. Your all of your insides feel it when you walk into a room and you start realizing that they're interacting with you based on this very same concept that they want you to throw out.
You sure you look like you're reaching to unmute? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, that's so interesting, Achyuta, because I think it's such a twofold process. It's the way that I am seeing myself, and I understand, like, yeah, I'm in this body, and yeah, I have this whole conditioning, and like whatever my opinion is around that, there's like that part of the equation. And the other part of the equation is how other people see me, how other people treat me, what they say versus how they act. And so it's like this really, I love that term that you brought in, cognitive dissonance, because it's this really interesting like clash sometimes, where it's like someone could be saying something, but then their actions or ideals won't be necessarily measuring up. And I was really thinking about, when it comes to identity, or when it comes to like, what conditioning we were born in, what body we were born in. This question kept coming to my mind around, like, because we're talking about karma yoga, we're talking about work, we're talking about action. And then in this next verse that we're going towards, Krishna starts talking about the principle of yajna, or sacrifice, and how everything, work, he's defining work as things done as a sacrifice to Krishna, to Vishnu. And so it really begs the question, and I tend to ask myself this question a lot: why am I doing what I am doing? Or why am I thinking what I am thinking? Because a lot of times people think, myself included, that like thought and mind is separate from sense gratification, or it's like, it's like the senses and then the mind. And it's like, no, the mind is a tool, and the mind can be used to elevate us to higher consciousness. But the mind and all of its opinions, and all of the opinions that we get fed, are definitely 100% also part of that sense gratification, if we let it be. And so the question always comes down to, why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? And where did this even come from in the first place? Because when it comes to identity, I tend to, I've always had that question, because I was mentioning yesterday, I was raised in this like very Latin family, but where my mom was like almost a little bit of an elitist. She was just like, we're not like the rabble, we're not like those ghetto Latinos over there, we're different. And we were raised in like a very religious, intense environment. And I remember, like, as a teenager, and then I was coming out as a teenager, and I remember like, well, where did these ideas come from in the first place? Or like, how is this different? Or why am I different than that person? And all these questions always circulated in my head. And I think that a lot of the times, the more questions that we ask, you tend to get into, or at least my experience was that the more questions that I asked, the more trouble I got in a sense, because I was not accepting the status quo of any identity that was being thrust upon me by society. I remember, I like broke out of my religion and etc. when I was a teenager, and I really went into that like rebellious gay culture, kind of just like party. And I remember at one point I was like, okay, this is fun, but like, why are we doing this in the first place? I always got to that question. And I remember when I started to ask a lot of those questions, my friends like saw it as like an assault on them and their identity. And I'd be like, but who said this in the first place? And why do we have to behave this way? And what does this even mean? And what, all of these things. And it's so interesting how those deeper questions of like, what am I doing? Who am I doing it for? What is this in service to? Or who is this in service to? It's like, it's almost like we try not to ask those questions, because it's easier to just, go along with whatever it is. And I'm not saying, because I think a lot of the times when we talk about like identity and identity politics or sexuality or whatever, and I've found myself getting really intense or heated about certain things, and I've learned to kind of like be a little bit more compassionate, because I think that what people get upset about when spiritualists or people in, I don't know, whatever spiritual circles or religious circles talk about identity, is that it seems like they're you're not the body. There's like an erasure of identity in itself. And people will feel like, well, I've struggled so much, I've struggled to fight for my identity, or I've struggled with all of the rest of society opposing who I am or who I love or like whatever. And now you're telling me like we're all happy spiritual family and we should just be forgiving and accept everyone, and just I'm not the body and we're just all souls and everything's like, you know, kumbaya and whatever. And so there's a little bit of like, there's a little bit of a So I think it is really important to acknowledge people's struggles, and it's really important to acknowledge that it is a big difference. There is a huge difference depending on what body you're born in, what gender, what sexuality, what race, like, what socioeconomic status you're born in. There's a huge difference. And I really appreciated this what Doyal said yesterday. It's like everyone has, I can't remember exactly the words that Doyal used, but like everyone is going through such a complex experience in themselves. And so therefore it's like identity politics has a power to it in a sense, because it's like, hey, we're getting oppressed, so we're going to come together as a race, as a community, as a culture to like fight the oppressor. And like that makes sense in my mind. But then I think the problem becomes when that identity or that thing, and whatever it is, because it can even be like for devotees as well. Now it becomes concretized. This is what it means to be a good Black person. This is what it means to be a cool gay person. This is what it means to be a good devotee who listens. Like once it starts to be utilized almost on the offense of like, if you're not like this, then that means that something is wrong with you or you're not fitting in, then it becomes a problem. So it's such a delicate thing almost, because it's like, just to end my rant, it's almost like we're not incentivized to ask those deeper questions and just be okay with like, yeah, this is my identity, or this is how I've been grouped into society, and it is what it is. And then you notice that when you do start to ask those deeper questions, people get uncomfortable actually. So that says a lot. It's really interesting.
I think more than not incentivized to ask those questions, you're discouraged from asking them. And, like I even said yesterday, sometimes you can be discouraged by the outside groups. And sometimes you can be discouraged by your own people in your own groups. And a lot of times it can come from the idea that, okay, not asking the questions and going with the flow for right now was supposed to keep a group safe. But there were supposed to be spaces where people would come together and ask those questions amongst themselves in small crews, tribes, little safe spaces. And I think it's really, really, really important to be able to try and form those small safe spaces where we can ask those questions. And what happens is people don't always like it because there's a cognitive dissonance now if you're challenging what I've believed for however long. I've jumped into whatever faith in whatever way, whatever kind of faith, with both feet, with all my heart. And now you want me to question why I did that? Like, this is turning all of my faith on its head. And I don't know what to do with that. I'm just trying to get through. But as uncomfortable as it makes us feel, it is important for us to check in and figure out why we are doing things before it comes to a situation where we do spend too many years in a situation that just might not be right for us, because it does build bitterness and resentment, and that will come out. You can only repress those feelings, but for so long. And as Krishna is saying in this third chapter and other repression will not work. Repression will not accomplish what we think it will accomplish. But I mean, like we've both been saying, it's kind of a balance everyone is trying to strike. It's this idea of, can people be emotional? Well, guys can't, because that's not what real men do. And women can't, because if women are emotional, then all of a sudden it's like, well, that woman must be on her cycle. It's like, or we are emotional people who have emotions and interactions. And how is it that, and all of us are trying to, in some way, shape, or form, get away with this idea of, I can do these things because it's me. And then the other person can't do the things because it's you. But I should be able to do the things because it's me. But this is actually a material world thing. And no one really is exempt from it. We're all going through it, and we're all trying to navigate our way away from trying to control others, and trying to come to a place where we are allowing others to be who they are, because that's what God is doing every day. He is not forcing people to his will. As much as some mystics would like to have us believe that, clearly the world would not be the way it is if God was forcing people to his will. So he's really not. He has set this place up, he's set us up, and then he's kind of allowing us to be who we're going to be. Krishna keeps saying to Arjuna, he's like, look, you deliberate and then do what you think is best. I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to, you deliberate, you tell me what you want. And that is a supreme level of acceptance. It is Krishna following his own advice that you can only do your duty and not be attached to the results. Krishna does his duty of setting all of these living entities up. And then he tells himself, as God even, that he's not going to be attached to the results. He's going to let these living entities do what they do, even if they are yearning and praying and hoping to forget him. It's so rough, but somehow Krishna's doing it. And that's why I think Krishna's God.
There's something I wanted to share that I appreciate, but I read somebody put in the chat, these social expectations tend to force people to wear masks so as not to rock boats and create a slightly fake peace. And my first thought was, are people still wearing masks? And then I realized, oh, she's talking about a different kind of mask. I was like, why are we talking about wearing masks? But so as not, but people would wear masks so as not to rock boats and create a slightly fake peace. But I appreciated most from you, Chuta, what you just shared amongst a lot of different things, was the idea of recognizing material world problems. Because I think sometimes when something comes up, we think it's just us, whether it's like, it's in my community or in my family or in my relationship or at my work. It's like, oh, my work is just so like this, or by my family is just so crazy. It's like, no, the world is crazy. Like everyone is crazy. Or it's like, why is this happening in spiritual institutions? Because it's filled with people. Because it's filled with people, and people have egos and misconceptions, and we're struggling and we're trying to figure things out. And so I think it helps us a little bit, give a little compassion to ourselves and other people when realizing that we don't have to think that what we're struggling with is just it's because the person we're dealing with is such a nincompoop, but it's actually because the material world is just a place of, it's where these struggles are going to take place. Communication is a challenge. Understanding, listening, empathy is a challenge. Not taking things personally is a challenge. Getting triggered is a challenge. And if it's not here, we're going to experience it somewhere else. And so I appreciate you broadening that perspective out a little bit, so that we don't think like, oh, it's these people, because I think we get to that, it's like they and these people, and people are just, these people, but it's like, it's all of us, me included. And so I think that it helps us not get so judgmental and so stuck, thinking that because we're no longer we no longer have to be two people or a group of people against each other, but we can step back alongside each other, and we're actually facing this common problem of the climate of quarrel and hypocrisy, the climate of the tendency to fight and disagree, the climate of ego, the climate of friction envy and misunderstanding, that's the real quote unquote enemy that we're facing, so to speak. It's not you, it's not the other. And so I appreciate you you broadening that out a little bit. Kishore, you were leaning in until I said something. Did you want to say something? Are we turning it over to Kimberly?
I think we're turning it over to Kimberly.
Chiefly, like she said, podcast goes fast, 30 minutes goes quick. Martha said in the chat, I would like to believe the closer we get to Krishna, the further away we place ourselves from those situations, from those people judging us. Then Baldevi followed it up. No social, emotional, verbal masks. Thank you for clearing, Baldevi. Hiding our truths to protect others or ourselves with tense silence. Hare Krishna. And Kimberly, is she here? Oh, there she is. Yeah. Our ordained Wrap It Up Acharya. What you got for us as some takeaways, Kimberly?
Thank you. Today we're taking away to not be afraid to challenge the status quo, not to be a rebel, but to honestly ask the deeper questions, to allow others to be who they are. And it's not just happening to us, it's happening to all of us because the material world is a challenging place that we are all facing together. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing words?
I think the closing thing for me is that as much as I would like to change the entire world, all I can do is change myself one outlook at a time. Because, we have these ideas like, well, you know what, the closer we get to Krishna, then the further away we'll get from all this stuff. Krishna's standing on a battlefield, facing other family members of his own that know that he's the supreme person and are still choosing to oppose him in everything that he stands for. These masks that we are rebelling against because we feel like, well, you know what, once I just fix this problem of this mask business, I'll be free and the world will be free. But we're talking about something that was being spoken 5,000 years ago, and they're still talking about the same issues. These are not new issues. These are not new tenets. These are not new oppositions even. They were already talking about caste and culture and differences and how, like, all of these things were existing. Now it is up to me. Maybe I can't change this entire world, but I can change my internal space, one outlook at a time. I can't expect anyone else to get away from lording it over in this material world problem, this ego problem. All I can do is change my own internal settings, one outlook at a time. And then I can trust that can be enough. Because I don't think we'll ever be able to get rid of all the masks. Even Arjuna couldn't. Krishna's telling him, he's like, you're never going to be able to get rid of all that. He's like, but you can do it smart. You can be smart. If you're going to have to wear the mask, if you're going to have to navigate, do it for me. Be smart about it.
We are an anti-mask culture here at the Bhakti Center.
No, they're not. Stop trying to get canceled.
Oh man, just got us in a bunch of trouble.
It's really crazy. I was flying over here to Ecuador and I was just like, it's really crazy how it feels like nothing happened, but obviously we went through like this crazy vortex of the pandemic, but I was just in the airport like, everything is normal now. Like it was just so weird. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic for another time. But I really like what Achyuta said, because I think in terms of the masks that we wear, the societal masks that we wear, I really love that point that Achyuta brought up, that like, yeah, even Arjuna can't get rid of it. And Krishna is telling him like, do it smart, do it for me. And so I think it just really begs the question for us, and this is my takeaway of like, again, asking those deeper questions and not letting ourselves be thrown off our game and forgetting what the goal is, because I think a lot of the times we forget what the goal is and we get so wrapped up in my problems and their problems and the world's problems and all the problems that all of a sudden my life is just filled with problems and everything is just a problem. And it's like, when that happens, and I'm speaking for myself, it's like I forget about the goal. I forget about, you know, my spiritual goal that I have in this life. And so I think that asking those questions of why am I doing something, or what is it that I'm even doing, or who is it that I'm doing it for, it will soften things a lot. Because a lot of times, for me, wearing those societal masks that I have to wear sometimes can be really exhausting. And I'll get very like exhausted from, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to run away into the forest. And, you know, like Arjuna is also facing the same dilemma. And so I really love that Achyuta is bringing that point up, that like, actually Krishna is telling Arjuna, actually no one can do this, and everyone's forced to helplessly act, and everyone has to be in their, you know, do their dharma and just kind of like go with what they were born into this life with, but do it smart, you know. So I really love that point. Love it so much.
I'm just walking away with appreciation from both of you guys and for tolerating my just anything that comes out of my mouth. I appreciate your guys' authenticity, and I'm walking away with the same thing I walked away yesterday, which was looking deeper and appreciating the universe of each individual person. You know, every person has a childhood. Every person has parental issues on some level or another, some wound somewhere, whether it's a deep, glaring, massive wound or little scratches. But we still have our experiences of growing up and all the things that we go through in life. And it's easy just to look at a person and just kind of just create a statistic, you know, of an individual, and put them in a box, you know, and think we know who people are. And so these conversations kind of continue to call me to deepen my exploration of the depth of each individual person in the universe that is who they are. And I was thinking that on Thursday night Kirtan last week in front of Kirtan, and I was just praying, and I don't, maybe it was Thursday, it was some Kirtan. I was just praying in front of the deities in the temple, and just kind of like, sometimes when I'm in prayer, I just kind of throw whatever is going on without words in front of Krishna, and like, Krishna gets it. And as I was sitting in a room with like 100 other people, I was like, Krishna's doing that with like 100 other people right now. Like, I'm not the most complex, deep, you know, person that, like, I don't even know if my prayer's at the top of the list, you know, like, who can even say that? And I was just reaching around and thinking, like, I'm going through it right now. Like, everyone's going through life because, like, we're individuals in a body, and you know, whatever it might be. And so I just, that general appreciation and empathy and compassion to look beyond the mask that people put on, and that I put on other people, and see something deeper. So thank you guys for that. That's what I'm walking away with. And I love you guys and appreciate you so much. And we look forward to seeing you guys all again. We'll be well until I was trying to say like a closeout phrase or something, and I wiffle balled it. I biffed it. We love you guys. Maybe they're gonna edit that out, or maybe not. I leave it in there. We love you guys. Be well, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye.